The Pie by Gary Soto. I knew enough about hell to stop me from stealing. I was holy in almost every bone. Some days I recognized the shadow of angels flopping on the backyard grass, and other days I heard faraway messages in the plumbing that howled underneath the house when I crawled there, looking for something to do. But boredom made me sin. Once in the German market, I stood before a rack of pies, my sweet tooth gleaming and the juice of the guilt wetting my underarms. I gazed at the 9 kinds of pie, pecan and apple being my favorites, although cherry looked good too, and my dear fat-faced chocolate was always a good bet. I nearly wept trying to decide which to steal, and, forgetting the flowery dust priests give off, the shadow of angels and the proximity of God howling in the plumbing underneath the house, sneaked a pie behind my coffee-lid frisbee and walked to the door, grinning to the bald grocer whose forehead shone with a window of light. No one saw, I muttered to myself, the pie like a discus in my hand, and hurried across the street, where I sat on someone's lawn. The sun wavered between the branches of the yellowish sycamore. A squirrel nailed itself high on the trunk, where it forked into 2 large bark-scabbed limbs. Just as I was going to work my cleanest finger into the pie, a neighbor came out to the porch for his mail. He looked at me, and I got up and headed for home. I raced on the skinny legs to my block, but slowed to a quick walk when I couldn't wait any longer. I held the pie to my nose and breathed in its sweetness. I licked some of the crust and closed my eyes as I took a small bite. In my front yard, I leaned against the car fender and panicked about stealing apple pie. I knew an apple got Eve in deep trouble with snakes because Sister Marie had shown us a film about Adam and Eve being cast into the desert, and what scared me more than falling from grace was being thirsty for the rest of my life. But even that didn't stop me from clawing a chunk from the pie tin and pushing it into the cavern of my mouth. The slop was sweet and gold-colored in the afternoon sun. I laid more pieces on my tongue, wet, finger-dripping pieces, until I was finished and felt like crying, because it was about the best thing I'd ever tasted. I realized that right there and then, in my 6th year, in my tiny body of 200 bones and 3 or 4 sins, that the best thing in life came stolen. I wiped my sticky fingers in the grass and rolled my tongue over the corners of my mouth. A burp perfumed the air. I felt bad not sharing with cross-eyed Johnny, a neighbor kid. He stood over my shoulder and asked, "Can I have some?" Crust fell from my mouth and my teeth were bathed with jam-like filling. Tears blurred my eyes as I remembered the grocer's forehead. I remembered the other pies on the rack, the warm air of the fan above the door, and the car that honked as I crossed the street without looking. "Get away," I had answered cross-eyed Johnny. He watched my fingers greedily push big chunks of pie down my throat. He swallowed and said in a whisper, "Your hands are dirty," then returned home to climb his roof and sit watching me eat the pie by myself. After a while, he jumped off and hobbled away because the fall had hurt him. I sat on the curb. The pie tin glared at me and rolled away when the wind picked up. My face was sticky with guilt. A car honked, and the driver knew. Mrs. Hancock stood on her lawn, hands on hip, and she knew. My mom, peeling a mountain of potatoes at the Ready Spud factory, knew. I got to my feet, stomach taut, mouth tired of chewing, and flung my frisbee across the street, its shadow like the shadow of an angel fleeing bad deeds. I retrieved it, jogging slowly. I flung it again until I was bored and thirsty. I returned home to drink water and help my sister glue bottle caps onto cardboard, a project for summer school. But the bottle caps bored me, and the water soon filled me up more than pie. With the kitchen stifling with heat and lunatic flies, I decided to crawl underneath our house and lie in the cool shadows of listening to the howling sound of plumbing. Was it God? Was it Father, speaking from death, or Uncle from his last shiny dime? I listened, ear pressed to a cold pipe, and heard a howl like a sea. I lay until I was cold and then crawled back to the light, rising from one knee, then another, to dust off my pants and squint in the harsh light. I looked and saw the glare of a pie tin on a hot day. I knew sin was what you took and didn't give back. From A Summer Life in 1990.